Video 2, Genesis, Rocks and Fossils. This video examines the evidence for the biblical Genesis flood found in the rocks and fossils which cover the Earth's land masses. Video 1, Genesis and Geomorphology, shows the appearance or geomorphology of the Earth's surface as a testimony to large-scale catastrophic water action. And Video 3, After the Flood, provides a biblical history of the world after the Genesis flood. Few people today believe that the global Genesis flood of the Bible and the destruction of the old world is anything more than a legend. As a result, the authority of Scripture has been undermined. Yet this wasn't always the case. Until the 1850s, the book of Genesis was held to be an accurate account of world history, with an earth less than 10,000 years old and having a supernatural creator. This was the worldview of many of the founding fathers of modern science, men such as Sir Isaac Newton, Louis Pasteur and Charles Babbage. Following the publication of Charles Lyell's Principles of Geology in 1830, the uniformitarian view of the Earth's history began to predominate. This is slow and steady change over ever-increasing timescales. Lyell's stated purpose was to free the science from Moses. This tells us that he was not looking at the evidence to see where it led, but had a no-God agenda. At the present time, geologists are once again beginning to recognize the catastrophic nature of the evidence, but these neo-catastrophists maintain long periods of time between events, not because the evidence proves it, but in order to accommodate the claims of evolutionary biology, a separate subject. The no-God agenda is still the paradigm today in the natural sciences. The Bible tells us in 2 Peter 3 that such a time would come when people would reject the flood in order to reject Scripture. The idea of a single catastrophe would be mocked, despite the evidence, and not because of it. Why is an understanding of the flood important? Because Jesus taught it, and he also said that if we would not believe earthly things where the physical evidence is available for examination, then we would not believe heavenly things. The geomorphology video proposes a biblical model for the formation of today's landmass. During the flood, if the entire earth was covered by water, as the Bible teaches, then it follows that the seabed beneath this water would have been composed of unconsolidated marine sediment. Today's seabed is made of an entirely different type of material, which is volcanic in origin, called basalt. Today's seabed began to be produced after day 150 of the flood, and as the continents were formed, the water came off the land, firstly as a sheet flow into the newly created ocean basins, causing in the process today's land topography. There are many obvious examples of plastic deformation of rock sequences, yet we know that rock is not at all flexible, and so therefore must have been soft when it was folded. When sedimentary or water-deposited material becomes hard rock, it is said to be lithified. This lithification, when it is observed today, happens quickly, within hours or decades, depending upon the conditions. Rock does not need millions of years to form, as is often claimed, and its presence is no proof of long ages. It just needs the right conditions. Sedimentary rock covers most of the Earth's land surface, sometimes to a depth of 5 kilometers. Contained within this rock are the fossils of dead animals which were buried suddenly in the flood sediments, and their form is often perfectly preserved. Sedimentary rock typically exhibits sorting and grading. This is a dynamic process involving moving water. In this example, for instance, there are no pebbles or random accumulations of material. It's all small particles, finely sorted and graded. The evidence in the appearance of these sequences suggests a singular event and not millions of years of time. If we consider the proposition that each layer does represent some period of time, where are the marks of wind and water erosion or biological activity such as worms or plant life? Why is each and every layer perfectly preserved without any discontinuity? There is no time in these rocks. Each of these layers were laid down rapidly in moving water. In Wales, mountains have been excavated to retrieve slate tiling. One blow in line with the laminae causes a rock to split along the perfectly flat and previously undisturbed strata. This would be impossible if there had been enough time for life to exist in the sediment when it was laid down. On a larger scale, the sedimentary rock layers or sequences appear flat, such as this example in the canyon wall, but it should be appreciated that they don't go on forever and eventually get thinner, pinch out, or gradually become a different type of rock. It is claimed by flood deniers, long agers, or uniformitarians that rock sequences have been laid down over hundreds of millions of years, one on top of another. Yet, if that is the case, why in this example is the white rock interbedding or mingling its sequence with the red rock? The white rock is supposed to be 200 million years older than the red rock, but here they are lithified together. This interbedding is a known product of the fluid mechanics of sedimentary stratification and can be replicated in a simple flow tank experiment. Sediments with different densities interbed in the same event. Despite the great height of the canyon walls, the evidence shows that they were deposited in a single event and not over millions of years. The idea that sedimentary materials have been laid down one on top of the other, with the youngest on top and the oldest below, is known as the principle of superposition. It is the fundamental principle of secular geology, and at first sight appears so obvious that it doesn't need to be questioned, and until recently it wasn't. It's also handy for evolutionists because superposition can be used to explain fossil distribution within the evolutionary paradigm. The principle of superposition is valid for still water conditions, but water is never still, it flows, because of the gravity of the moon causing tides, because the water cycle produces rain, which gives rise to rivers, lakes and mudslides, and because of wind and wave action. For superposition to be a valid treatment of sediment deposits on the Earth, all these things must be absent. Even if it were supposed at some time in the past that there was no moon or water cycle to cause the movement of water, then the sediment could not be transported and deposited in the first place. Today, if we want to learn how moving water deposits sediment, a river is the obvious place to start looking, especially at the exit or river delta where most of the deposition is taking place. In the case of river deltas, there are two important features. The deposited material continuously advances out to sea, or as the experts say, progrades. The sequence of material is fine and light at the bottom, becoming coarser towards the top. No matter how long the river flows or how far the material progrades outwards to the sea, even to the extent of eventually silting up the river entrance, it will always be found, wherever you drill or dig, that the finest, lightest silt is the first to settle and so is at the bottom of the sequence, and the heavier is the last to settle and so is at the top. This is the reverse of static water conditions, where the heavier objects are the first to settle at the bottom and the lighter settle at the top. A basic understanding of progradation is necessary in understanding how sedimentary rock sequences were laid down. A way of understanding this is to consider a breaking wave on the beach. The weather has created a wave. While the wave is at sea, because it is surrounded by water, all parts of the wave move at the same speed. As it approaches the beach, the bottom part of the wave comes into contact with the seabed and is slowed down by the friction. Meanwhile, the upper part of the wave maintains its speed. The top of the wave, therefore, trips up over the bottom part and breaks on the beach. Next time you are cleaning out the roof gutters, after you have got rid of the large items, such as leaves, etc., place a hose at one end of the gutter and observe the downstream end. You will notice two things. Even though the particles all started their journey mixed up together, they become sorted according to size. The smaller particles are in the lower layer and move at about half the speed of the larger particles in the upper layer. This is because the lower layer is, like the wave, experiencing friction. The smaller particles gradually drop out of the slower moving water and are therefore the first to settle. Particle behavior in moving water is the reverse of still water. Smaller particles drop out first, not large ones. This is the mechanism which on a large scale is seen today in river delta progradation, and it is this mechanism which explains the sorting and deposition of the even larger sedimentary rock deposits on the Earth's surface. Fresh pulses of randomly sized particles will cause the recently introduced material to be sorted by size and laid on top of the old material. In this example, there are three sequences of random particles separated by time, which have been sorted according to particle size, smaller at the bottom, becoming larger towards the top. Simple observation, therefore, of real-world processes and the appearance of sedimentary rock disprove the idea of slow and gradual superposition as an explanation of the world's sedimentary rock deposits, and also has consequences for the supposed age of fossils as proposed by evolutionary theory. The following video explains the successful work of Dr. Guy Berthold in demonstrating how sedimentary materials are laid down